So this is not what my job was supposed to be today. Today I was supposed to be relaxing and lounging by the pool. But the person who was supposed to talk and have this conversation with Eric was not available, so they said, how about you? And I was like, okay, Eric, this morning we meet at the gym, okay. And I tell Eric, I go, guess who's having this conversation with Eric Stoltz this morning? So I said, just be prepared. He goes, let's just have a conversation and open it up to the audience as well. So I will try to ask the questions that you probably all want to ask Eric Stoltz.
Oh dear.
And then we'll get to the questions that you all really would like to ask Eric.
I see where this is headed.
The first question, okay, and I would like to, address the elephant in the room, and it's been a running joke between Eric and me.
Oh, don't do this.
What was it like to work with Cher?
I wish the original moderator had made her flight. Working with Cher, it's been a long-standing joke with Sandy and I because it's been a question I've heard for the last 30 years from strangers, family, friends, because Cher has this hold upon the nation's interest, and rightfully so. And what I'd say is the absolute truth. She is one of those rare and unique creatures that exists that has no filters. She will speak her mind. She will say, Eric, you look terrible. Why are you wearing a hat? And I'll say, I like my hat, and it's bright. And she, take it off, it's terrible. Or, that's a negative one, but equally she's complimentary. But when you engage with someone who does not lie, you can't take your eyes off of them. It is fantastic. And that's one reason she is such a terrific actress, is because, well, I don't know what happened in her life. I do know what happened in her life, but she no longer cares enough to smooth the conversation with polite falsities. She speaks the truth, and working with her was an eye-opening experience.
To just share, every time I see Eric, I have to start with, what was it like to work with Cher? So many meetings that we had to finance this movie or to go to meet an actor. I go, Eric, what was it like to work with Cher? So I never let him forget that part of his.
Strange thing to live with, but there it is.
So we're going to go back. What I wanted to do today was not start the way most of these sort of conversations start with, where were you born and how were you raised? But I really want to start in the present and sort of work backwards. And talk to us about your transition from actor to director, and what has been that journey for you?
Well, it's interesting. I've recently got back in touch with an old childhood friend, Anthony Edwards, and we did our first film together, Fast Times. And we were pals in junior high and high school. We did plays together in Santa Barbara, California, which is not unlike Sarasota, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And we used to make little films. And I remember I made a film for my humanities class that Mr. Frainer taught, starring Anthony Edwards. And it was on Super 8, and I had to edit it and redo dialogue. And I remember feeling really connected to what I was doing and really loving it. And then I went on. I originally had planned on becoming a musician, but I became an actor. And I started I wanted to explore the production side of film. So I became a PA, a production assistant, on a few Cameron Crowe films. And I was fascinated with being behind the scenes and seeing the hierarchy of power and where the crew, how the crew interacted with the actors and how the actors interacted with the producers. And it was great not being an actor, because when you're an actor, you are treated a certain way, which is incredibly seductive. But I don't think it leads to great objectivity or humanity, because you're given everything you want all the time. Anyway, what a ramble. I was a PA for a while, and then I produced some independent films, and I was on this one particular film that I had, sold the rights to foreign territories and raised the money for and got a great cast. And the director, on the first day, it was his first time directing, screamed at the cast and screamed at the crew, "You're ruining my film!" And we were paying them all, $50 a day. And I had to step in to make sure nobody walked off the film. And all through that film, I was stepping in and talking to the actors and talking to the crew, and I realized I really enjoy this. I really enjoy the process of facilitating the talent with the craft and getting something done. And I produced a few more films, and I thought, what the hell? If something is thrown my way, I want to direct something. And then Bill D'Elia, a director on Chicago Hope, took me aside and said, "Why don't you shadow me? I think you'd be a good director."
Tell us what shadowing means.
Shadowing means when you trail a director through when you prep a film or a TV show, you see the location scouting, the casting, the prop meetings, the wardrobe, the choice of color, the choice of lens, the whole world that happens before you get the actors on the set. And I loved it. And then I did some short films, and I was offered an acting job on a show called Once and Again with Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, who were also mentors. And I said, I would love to act for you, but I want to direct as well. I sort of bartered myself to it. And they said, sure, great, because they did that with half the cast of 30-something. So it was just a series of fortunate events where I was with these mentors who helped sort of shove me towards doing something which now feels like I'm in the right place to be. It's just a really good feeling to do what you love to do.
Some of the episodic TV that Eric has directed, and these are just a few of them, include Nip Tuck, Private Practice, Grey's Anatomy, Californication, Nashville, and Glee. He's now an executive producer on Madam Secretary. Tell us a bit about what that role of executive producer means on the show that you're working on right now.
Well, my credit is executive producer, but my title actually is producing director. And I direct some episodes, and it is tasked to me to make sure our directors that come in know how to communicate to our cast and get the best out of them, know how to communicate to our crew and what works and what doesn't, and which personality needs more loving care and which just wants to be left alone, which actress wants to rehearse 4 times before they shoot, and which actress wants to shoot the rehearsal because the spontaneity is everything. So I'm sort of a guide, a spirit guide on the show to help the directors. And then also, the job of a producer is just problem solver. One day the wheel's broken on the sound cart, and one day these 2 crew members are fighting, and we need to fix the set, and can you call the writers because I don't like this line? And it's just a general stage manager job, similar to being a PA on Say Anything. Can you get me coffee? Yeah, sure, I'll get you coffee.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what a director's role is on a television series, on an episode? Because different directors direct different episodes over the course of a season. What is a typical life for a director on a TV show like?
I liken it to being a migrant worker, and that you go to, with much better pay and benefits, you go to Nashville and you figure out the lay of the land and what works on this show and what doesn't, and like I just said, what actress wants to rehearse and what doesn't, and then you go to Los Angeles and you work with a musical director, and you try to honor the spirit of the show, but at the same time, you'll often go on shows where actors will say, "Oh, I can't make this sing. It doesn't work." And you'll say, "Well, let's improvise. Let's try something." After we get what's written, because the writers always want to, rightfully, get on the screen what they wrote. But oftentimes, if you put in an improvisation or a line or a shift, and it serves the story better, everyone's happy, because a film generally has 3 lives, which is the writer writes the script and it lives in that area, and then you film it and it comes to life in different ways. The one actor is sick, it rained that day, you have to change this, and then in the editing room you realize, wow, that scene was terrible. I have to cut out all the dialogue and just do it in looks, and it sort of becomes something else. And you know this, it's a growing process, and the minute you say it has to only be what's written right there, you have people reciting words on a page, and the life kind of is sucked out of it. Not kind of, the life is sucked out of it. Anybody have any questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what it's like working with all those talented young people on Glee. Funny experiences?
Working with the talented young people on Glee, I described it once. It was a bit like being set down in a pen with 12 Tasmanian devils and their iPhones. They were maniacs. And I loved each and every one of them. And God rest it, 2 of them have died. It's horrible. But they were at the top of the world. They were touring. They were suddenly rich. They were suddenly famous everywhere they went. And getting them away from this to do the work was half the battle. And once they did, once you herded them towards this direction, we're doing this, they were like, oh, okay, sure. But there were 10 or 12 of them. And I think I connected with them because I wasn't in the least bit intimidated by their sudden fame. In fact, if anything, I felt a little bit sorry for what was in store for them. And when they would ask me, hey, what should I do, man? What should I do with my money? Should I go to Vegas for, with all my friends and party all night for my birthday and I'll be in the magazine? I would say things like, take that money and start therapy. Or, you know what? Go to Vegas after you put a down payment on a house, because this ain't going to last forever. And I was sort of like Jiminy Cricket, I was the old guy, because I've been around a lot of success and fame, and I guess I wasn't afraid to express what might happen. But I loved them all, and I missed them.
And I will say, for me, as the producer of Class Rank, Eric's success in bringing out the beauty in those performances on Glee and grounding that show in sort of a great sense of reality really was key in why I wanted Eric Stoltz to direct Class Rank. And I'm curious for you to talk a little bit about, you have an incredible film bio. How do you choose your projects?
Well, at a certain point, I took something that interested me because it shot in Europe, and I wanted to live in Europe for a while. Sometimes I would respond to a role, and I would pursue it and think, I've got to do this because I have it in me. Sometimes when my family was struggling, I said, I need money. I got to take some of the lesser jobs because I need to pay the bills and help my parents. And so it's a myriad of reasons, really. And sometimes I was lucky enough to say, I don't want to work for 3 months. I just want to drive across the country and visit friends and see what's happening out there. So there was never any grand... I was, at one point, my agent was Paula Wagner, who also had Tom Cruise, and we would go over to Paula's house and watch sports, and I realized that she looked at me like I was an oddity, because Tom and most of my generation of actors knew I'm going there, and I'm going to get on that superhighway, and I'm going to be the most successful, most famous person, and at the same time expand my talent. And this is not a knock at all. Those guys are extremely talented and driven, whereas I was much more, you know what, the superhighway, not so much. I'm going to get off at this exit and get lost. And they were always, I was living in Paris for a while, and they'd send me a script and say, "Are you coming back?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm going to run out of money in a couple months, and I'll come back." So the way I managed my career was not the most rewarding financially for the people in my camp.
So how did you choose to get involved with Class Rank if it certainly wasn't the financial?
Well, I mean, you sent me this script. Literally, my version of this story is, out of the blue, I was sent this script. And my agent said, "You know, it's a script. It's not really set up. It may or may not happen." And I think I read it. Well, no, I put it aside because I said, well, the moment before you read a script is thrilling to me because it's all possibility. And I'm given a lot of scripts, and a lot of them aren't that great. And you're disappointed, and after 20 pages, you think, well, this isn't for me. So I wanted to prolong that anticipation, because it's delightful, that feeling. And then I finally read the script, and I read it in about 40 minutes, and I said, I have to, this is fantastic. I loved everyone in it. I loved the idea of it. And I called you, or you called me. We had a phone meeting where we proceeded to talk about our pets, as I recall, for about 40 minutes.
And then I said, you should direct the movie.
But it's important. I mean, we had a conversation about life and about things that mattered to us. And I think about friends in common before we got around to talking about the script. And then we had some cast members, and they fell out. And we had some money, and it fell out. And you tell that story better than I. What's your version of that story?
Well, you know, it is an interesting thing, because what I shared with you last night, if you were at the movie, was that, you know, to find a director on a feature film is usually a very long process. And it takes months, and it could take years, and sometimes you can't even find that right person. And for me, it was very clear that after sort of growing up with Eric Stoltz in movies like Say Anything, Some Kind of Wonderful, the success he had with Glee, the sort of, here's the other thing about Hollywood. It's a very small world. And a lot of my friends had worked with Eric as a director, and they said, he is amazing. He's collaborative, he's open, he's prepared. And I was like, okay, it's Eric Stoltz. He's got to direct this movie. And it was very, very close to the time that Entertainment Weekly ran an article, and it said, Glee Saved My Life by Eric Stoltz.
That's right. I wrote this article for a magazine about my work with Glee and how much it meant to me, and working with these kids, and how I got a chance to correct certain events that happened in my own personal life as a teenager, being the outcast in high school. And anyway, you read that article.
And I said, it's got to be Eric Stoltz. And I started to call different friends of mine, and they said, I know Eric, you guys will really like each other. And you know, one of the things that Mark said in the introduction last night is I also teach at AFI, American Film Institute in Los Angeles. And what I tell my students is that, you know, it's a relationship that you embark upon with your writer, with your director, with your whoever you're going to be working with. It's somebody that you want to be able to talk to morning, noon, and night.
You're going to be spending a lot of time together.
It's a very, you know, I always say Hollywood's great for people that are, really good in short-term intimacy, because it's very intimate for a very short period of time. You make a movie, beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end to it. But that middle and the beginning and the end is a really long time when you're not getting along with that person. So it was important for us to talk about things like pets, like friends in common, sensibility, aesthetic, what speaks to you in the script, what's important. There's just sort of that sort of shared moment that I felt we had on this phone call. And like I said, it was by the end of this phone call, we both said, it's a pretty good date. Let's go steady. Let's go to the next step. And that's sort of how it happened. And it's for me in the movies that I've been fortunate enough to produce, it's never happened that way. So it's been very charmed and blessed and easy from the beginning. And, we had our fair share of obstacles and our ups and our downs. And all things considered, in the course of making independent movies right now, and you see there's this logo and this executive producer and this person, it does take a village. But in the scheme of things, I think this was actually a pretty shortened process from start to being here today.
It certainly was for me, because apparently you had been working on the script for 4 or 5 years before you even sent it to me.
Oh, right, there was that too.
And when I got the script, I think I told you, I said, wow, there's only 2 or 3 things that bumped for me, and can we make some adjustments? And Sandy said, sure, let's call the writer. Ben August, I sent him my ideas. He said, yeah, sure. In 24 hours, he had rewritten 3 or 4 different things. It was astonishing how incredibly open he was to collaboration as well. Every step of the process of making this film was kind of blessed in that way.
Ben August must have written 300 drafts of this movie. And that's what I always say, that a script is never finished. And you're always writing, and you're always rewriting. And when the director comes on, they have their notes. And I felt like that creative process of this movie was a really beautiful one.
It was.
And we're actually still like each other and trying to find another movie to do together.
And not only that, after the writer, when we're filming, as I alluded to before, Bruce Dern decides to improvise. And the moment that there are some gems in it that you think, I've got to use that, wasn't in the script, and it takes on a life of its own. So it's a breathing process. Are there any more questions? I feel like, yes, ma'am.
I have a two-part question.
2.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. First question is, as a director, the great Milos Forman, interesting to work with. Maybe not didn't come out with the best film, or maybe you didn't personally like them. But which directors, as an actor,
Right.
were the most interesting and helpful?
Okay, sure.
And can I just jump in there? Some of the directors that Eric has worked with, Quentin Tarantino, Cameron Crowe, John Hughes, Amy Heckerling, just a few.
Just a few. Milos Forman, I had the honor of meeting at one point about 15 years ago. He was going to make a movie about sumo wrestlers. Why he met with me, I have no idea. But he was a lovely man, and I was a huge fan of his, especially his early work when he was part of the Czech New Wave, Loves of a Blonde and the Fireman's Ball. Amazing films, right up to Cuckoo's Nest, and I even loved Hair. I was a huge Milos Forman fan, and when I met with him, he was sitting there with a big cigar in a hotel room, which, actors are now not meeting directors in hotel rooms for good reason. Nothing untoward happened, but except for that cigar, which I found incredibly offensive and hard to breathe. But he was sitting there with his cigar, and he was talking about sumo wrestling with his accent. And I had met him before because he was friends with Ivan Passer and Dusan Makavejev, 2 former Eastern Bloc directors that I worked with in Europe. And I sort of fell in with this crowd of these amazingly talented and interesting directors. And those are 2 of the directors that I loved, Ivan Passer and Dusan Makavejev. I made a film called Manifesto with Dusan and Haunted Summer with Ivan Passer. And also, other directors that I thrill to are Arthur Penn, who I worked with several times, Peter Bogdanovich, who I worked with several times, Michael Caton Jones, who I worked with several times. You know, directors that sort of stay with you and guide you. And when I joined the DGA, they make you get 3 DGA members, that's the Union, Directors Guild of America. They make you get 3 directors to sign you in to vouch for your character. And I had Peter Bogdanovich, Arthur Penn, and Michael Caton Jones. And those three men really changed my life for the better. Not that it was horrible. Anyway, yes, Sandy.
You know, when to go back to a previous moment on Eric coming on board on Class Rank, is that I think it's also really interesting if you could talk about that while we made Class Rank, you were also working and EPing, executive producing, on Madam Secretary. How did you balance that?
My bosses at Madam Secretary, Laurie McCreary and Barbara Hall, graciously let me go. And I think it was my first year or second year on that show. And I went to them and I said, you guys, I have a chance to do this film that I committed to before I came on to Madam Secretary. Is there any way you could see around to letting me go for a month? And then I would do the editing at nighttime and all that. And they gave me their blessing, which is unheard of. And I am forever grateful to these women that I work for allowing this to happen. And then while I was in Louisiana, at nighttime or on the weekends, I would give notes on rough cuts of Madam Secretary and stay a part of that process. But for them to let me go and do this was... In this business, you rarely encounter true generosity. And when you do, it's terribly moving. And I feel like I owe so much to these women because they also made me a producer of this show, which is crazy. I had come on as a director, and they liked the way I worked, and they said, "Are you interested in taking this job?" And I said, "I've never done it before," and they said, "We'll teach you."
How many days does it take to shoot an episode of Madam Secretary?
Almost all one-hour drama TV shows have 8 days to prepare, 8 days to film, and then 8 days to edit.
And how many days did you shoot Class Rank in?
18 days.
What was it like? Is there a difference in your day-to-day life as shooting Class Rank and shooting Madam Secretary?
Well, if I were to compare the two experiences, Madam Secretary is part of the studio machinery that is backed by an enormous amount of money and talent and equipment. Anything I want. I'd love a crane for this shot. Oh, we'll have one for you tomorrow. 40 foot or 60 foot. It'll come down in steady foot. I need 63 extras, including a nun and twins and someone who signed. Oh, we'll have them for you tomorrow. I would like a veggie burger. Okay, here. And it's the machinery is so in place and works so well that it is hard not to get spoiled. And then I come down to Class Rank, where there is nothing, really. Very little, except for big-hearted people trying their best. And many's the day where I would go to a PA and say, here's $50, please go buy bagels for everyone, because all we had was this.
How many hours do you shoot a day on Madam Secretary?
We try and do 12 hours and under.
What was an average shooting day on Class Rank?
We try to do 12 hours, but it's a different kind of 12 hours because when we would wrap, I would then prep and scout the next day's work with the people, the department heads, or I would rehearse with the actors for the next day, or we would rehearse on weekends. We had to take advantage of every waking hour to get the work done.
As a director, do you do you get more enjoyment out of, if you had the equipment and the money and the machine, would you rather be directing movies or television?
Oh, goodness. That makes me want to shake my legs a little bit. I'd rather be directing films in 1939 because it felt like the infrastructure was in place there with studio heads who loved telling stories. Similar to you, Sandy. If you were running a studio and they knew what they were doing and they made stories that seemed to matter to people. They made a lot of dreck as well, but they seemed, and I picked that particular year because 1939 is an amazing, if you just look at the films that came out, amazing films came out. But they were more in tune with story, whereas it feels to me in my heart that most of the films we get nowadays come from comic books or tent poles or big $100 million epics that generally leave me unmoved, if not dazzled. And I would rather watch A Place in the Sun, which I jumped to the 50s, which is a story with great acting and wonderfully told tale.
You know, I was with you last night and with a lot of you here, and the response to the movie was so immediate and verbal, and you know, it was, when I was walking with you, it was like being with a rock star and getting this feedback. How do you get that from television?
Oh, you don't. You don't get any feedback at all from television that I'm aware of. But I don't really act that much anymore. And I guess when I did, you would get that kind of feedback on the subway or walking down the street. But that kind of immediate... The best thing is watching the film with you guys last night. I was standing behind the screen, watching it projected backwards, which was a very interesting way to watch something. It was a bit like a dream had come unhinged. And I could shift my focus from Bruce Dern's face to you guys because you were sort of lit. And I was watching... There's a great scene in 400 Blows when all the boys ditch school and they go to the movies. And there's just a shot of them watching a movie. And watching you guys watch this movie was the most gratifying thing ever. It was... You just don't get that with television. Oh, there's a question out there. Yes, absolutely. You can address the cobbling of the finances.
Well, our financier lives in Alexandria, and there's a great tax rebate in the state of Louisiana, which is what forced us to shoot in Louisiana.
And also, by the way, Sean, our producer, had this relationship with the town that was extraordinary. That high school we shot in would have, had we shot in New Jersey or the tri-state area, would have cost at least $50,000 a day to shoot in. And we must have been there close to a week, and they opened up their doors, and the students, they left, the principal, lovely woman who's in the film, said, "Oh, I can have everyone in the auditorium for you on Tuesday between noon and 4. And sure enough, suddenly we had 400 kids. And that kind of spirit, it reminded me a bit of what it must have been like making silent movies, because there were no permits, and no one really expected anything out of it other than, oh, what's it like to make a movie? Oh, that's what a camera looks like. That director's yelling a lot. That must be what directing is. Not yelling in anger, just, come on, let's shoot. So it had its advantages, but I think, yeah, shooting in New Jersey would have been better for the story. And in fact, there is a shot of a New Jersey mall that I stole a few months later and I cut in there, unbeknownst.
You know, there's always what we talk about. There's this scene on the page, and then there's the script that you have, and then there's the movie that you make. When you were watching it backwards last night, what scene for you was the most surprising, that surprised you the way it sort of came out?
Well, it's got to be Bruce Dern, because the man, it's like watching an animal in its environment. I've been on safari in Africa, and if you go with the right guide, he stops the jeep, and you're in the middle of a pride of lions, and you're watching them interact with each other, and it's riveting. And all they're doing is moving from here to there, batting around their young, biting their wife on the neck. All they're doing is behavior, but you don't know what's going to come next, and you know that it will be true when it does. And working with Bruce Dern, and watching you guys watch Bruce Dern, that scene where he comes up to her house with the quiche that he's cooked. And I said, okay, all right, I remember the rehearsal quite clear. I said, all right, let's rehearse this. And he came up and he goes, what do I do with the quiche, Eric? And I said, I don't know, Bruce, you figure it out. You're the actor. And he said, all right. And he went up and he looked around and he hit the doorbell with his head, which is absolutely true behavior, completely unexpected, completely unwritten. And I remember thinking, this man is fantastic. And it's like watching a jungle creature. That kind of thing, when that happens with actors, it's thrilling. And I think a director's job is to create an environment where they feel safe enough and free enough to honor an instinct that may or may not be written for them.
You know, Kristen Chenoweth has won an Emmy, a Golden Globe. She's a concert performance, Wicked, Broadway. What was it like? How did you get Kristen to agree to do our little movie?
Well, I had known her for a few years. We were doing a plays on Broadway at the same time, and we both went to a dog auction or a dog fair, something to help dogs. And then she invited me to see Candide. So we'd been in touch, and we went to dinner once. We'd been in touch. But I think what happened is you suggested her for this role, and I thought, she's perfect. She looks like Olivia Holt. But I'd lost contact with her, and you had contact with her. So I said, call her up, Sandy. And didn't you call her up? Yeah. You did all the work. But you did all the work, but I think it helped that she knew that I was a guy who acted and loved dogs and was able to eat dinner in a polite, interesting way.
You know, again, like I said yesterday, you could have a great script, but you need the filmmaker to sit down with these actors, to talk with these actors, to speak their language, for them to understand that they have a vision, a protection, a vocabulary that, you know, people like Kristen Chenoweth, people like Bruce Dern are offered movies almost every day of every week. How do they choose their movies? Why do they say yes to certain movies? In this movie, it clearly was not because of the money we were able to pay anybody.
It was in spite of the money.
Exactly, but it was so, I was able to deliver a good script and a compelling director to Kristen Chenoweth, who I had known for probably 15 years, who I've been trying to work with on a movie but would say no to everything. And then I said, please read this. It's a small role. We'll work on it with you. And please meet Eric and sit down with him. And I think that was, you two got together in New York.
Yeah, and I think we scheduled the film around her concert tour.
Exactly.
Scheduling. And going back to that, that's what you say is absolutely true, but it's, I think, an important thing that a director should bear in mind is that not every actor approaches it from the same place. And the kids on Glee, you know, some of them were professionals, some of them had just been found and had done nothing. They became sort of one unit of energy, but the kids in class rank, Skylar and Olivia, were completely different. They were driven to get these roles, to do their best, and the qualities that they had as actors to want to succeed as actors were exactly the same qualities that the roles needed. And they brought that naturally to them, whereas Kristen and Bruce and Kathleen Chalfant, who played the editor-in-chief, this wonderful actress who I had seen in Wit 20 years ago, and literally I remember just weeping through it because it's an astonishing play and she's an amazing actress. She was on Madam Secretary playing a school principal, and I approached her and said, and I think I told you guys, it has to be this woman because she is formidable and can deal with the power of Bruce Dern in a way that I wouldn't believe anyone else can. And sure enough, Kathleen Chalfant got on the set, and it was like watching a jiu-jitsu master deal with Bruce. And together he respected the way that she worked, and you could tell that they had something, a chemistry going, born out of whatever it was that they brought to these roles. And in casting, it's real important to find people that have the qualities the character needs, but also have a way of expressing them that help serve the story, if that makes sense.
And, you know, as long as we're sort of going through the different cast members, tell us about your process of meeting and casting Olivia Holt.
Olivia Holt, I believe you suggested Olivia at the beginning, and I had a Skype meeting with her, which I didn't much enjoy. And I mean, in all fairness, she was in Malibu at a birthday party or something. She had her life, and she was a TV. She had, you know, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I didn't see the qualities that I wanted to see as a person. Probably because she had a million things going and she was on a TV show and was doing an album and all that. So I went back to Sandy and said, I'm not sure, I don't know. And Sandy said, I'll tell you what. We'll arrange it again, we'll meet again, we'll do it one more time, and I think you said I'll have her in a different environment where there weren't so many distractions, because I remember there were a lot of distractions. And we had another meeting and I felt like that was the girl. I felt like, yeah, I think she can do it now. And I don't know what you had done behind the scenes to make that happen.
I think we also got her to audition. Didn't we get her on tape? Didn't we have her self-tape a scene?
Yeah, yes, I think she read with Skylar. That's exactly right. We had Skylar read with a few different actresses. And it was perfectly clear when we saw her and Skylar together that they were, although I still had that instinct that Olivia was too beautiful. And when she showed up in Louisiana, I said, I don't want you in any makeup. I want to knock down your natural beauty, because the point of this is that you guys are not necessarily perceived as being attractive to other kids. You're the brains. And she said, okay, all right. And I'd look at her, she'd come in, and she'd look, and then one time I went in to discuss a scene, and I saw the makeup woman doing her makeup, and I said, what the? I thought we were doing no makeup. And she said, well, this is my no makeup look. And it was hard. I even wanted her in a fat suit at one point, or I told the wardrobe, do not accentuate her loveliness, because this is not what this film is about. I want her loveliness to come from her behavior and her brain.
You know, one of the exciting things about, as I also shared with you last night, this is my third high school movie, is discovering these kids and finding the right match of who that person is for that role. And, you know, this is a bit about, you know, the first high school movie I made was Pump Up the Volume, and that starred Christian Slater, who was just sort of starting his career. And then I did this Christian high school comedy called Saved, which had Mandy Moore, which nobody really knew about at that point in her life. And I feel as strong and excited about Olivia Holt in class rank. And I think Olivia Holt is, you heard it here, she's going to be a big movie star.
She's got all the goods, that's for sure. And was so prepared, and both so cute. She and Skylar, who I think are both 18, both brought their mothers and their dogs. So, and I'd say bring them to set. And there's a shot of Skylar and his mother and her dog. Olivia's mother, I don't think, wanted to appear in it, but they would come to the set. I think, you know, my daughter's going to Louisiana to make an independent film. Part of it might have been, I'm just going to be there in case she needs me. And I think when they realized that the environment was lovely, that they relaxed and had a good time. But it's so nice when I did a film, Little Women, directed by Gillian Anderson. And I did a film called Grace of My Heart, directed by Allison Anders. And these two women created sets where the other actors, Susan Sarandon, and would bring their families and bring their children, and they would let the kids run around while we were filming and play music. And I thought, this is a great way to make a film. And sorry, I went off on a tangent on how I was inspired by these female directors, as opposed to, I've worked with some male directors who need to be the autocrat with the whip and the megaphone, and I am the alpha wolf.
I can't let you leave here without talking a little bit about one of your male directors. Tell us what it was like to work with Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino is similar to Cher in that when you see him on an interview and he's talking about this film, that's exactly what he's like. He is so intoxicatingly passionate about what he does and how he does it and how other people do it, that it is so much fun to be around that man. I haven't seen him in a while, but I have this memory of he said, "Hey, I want to show you Kill Bill in New York." I said, "Great. Be at this screening room." And I said, "Okay." So I show up and there's 10 of us and I'm sitting next to Quentin, and during the whole film, here, you be Eric Stoltz, and I'll be Quentin Tarantino.
I need a
You
hat.
watch the film.
I need a hat.
Here. You watch the film. Right? Huh? No, I wasn't so sanguine about it, but he was. It's like, finally I said, Quentin, it's hard to watch the film when you're watching me watch the film. That's why it was so nice to be behind the screen last night and watch you guys. But and on set, he would, if a shot wasn't working out, he'd grab the camera and say, "Let me try that, let me do it." And his force of personality overcame so many issues on that set that we had with budget and union and everything. By the way, at 12:55, I'm running with Mark because I have a plane to catch. I just have to say that now.
But I wanted to start with Cher and end with Quentin, okay? So it's kind of a perfect sort of segue to the end. And before we just open up to a few last questions is, what's next?
Well, hopefully Madam Secretary will continue another year. If you guys don't watch it, it's a wonderful fantasy about a government that truly cares about its people and behaves in an ethical way. It's on Sunday nights at midnight, I think. I have no idea, but you can DVR it. And I hope to continue on that, and I'm going to be acting in a film this summer with Elizabeth Moss, in a film directed by Alex Ross Perry, who has been to the Sarasota Festival many times. And now, pardon? As well as Elizabeth. Hey, Mark's here. Hey, there's the founder of your festival. I know.
I thought it was a heckler.
So, yes.
Okay, but do you realize the effect that movie had with so many people?
No, I didn't. I mean, when I hear stories, that's so kind of you to say. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, sometimes you make a story and it lives on and people say it helped, and that's the power of stories. And that's the best thing you can hope for from a story, that someone learned something and tried something and changed their behavior and walked a mile in another man's shoes. Thank you for sharing that.
I read an article where you were saying how people were so rotten to you when you were walking around on breaks.
They treated me poorly. They did, yeah.
That is how, I mean, she could attest to that.
Yeah.
That is how people treat people that look different.
Who are different. But it's interesting, I also spoke that they treat Cher the same way. I mean, when you are set apart for whatever reason.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and Rocky, I mean, his mother was on the set every day, so I would go to her and say, what would he do? What was he like? And she would say he had to go out of his way to put other people at ease, to help them feel okay talking to him with his craniodiaphyseal dysplasia, which is crazy for a 15-year-old boy, that it had to be that. But the fact that it then became a story that people in Sarasota can watch is stunning to me. That's wonderful. Thank you.
The beautiful thing about movies and television is that stories can make a difference and they can change the world. And I think it's sort of what keeps us all in this crazy business. It is very difficult, but if you find the right story, you can make a difference. So any last questions that you've always wanted to ask Eric Stoltz but were afraid to ask?
She's been trying
the lightning
for a while.
round.
Can you just briefly take us back to young Eric when you were dreaming of one day doing this with your life? And how did you get through the moments of like, is this ever going to happen? Or when am I going to, was there a moment that clicked for you?
Well, gosh, the question was, what did young Eric, how did I get through my...
Yeah, I'm sure you had moments of like...
Yeah, sure.
There's no logic to making it.
No, there's no logic to life, really. It's just how you deal with the moment. No, I had no vision at all. I would always go back to my acting class and hang out with my tribe of people that just wanted to get better at what we did. And I never for a second thought that I could be in a movie or on Broadway or, come to Sarasota and talk at a festival. I mean, did anybody read that article this morning of the physicist is saying that there is no such thing as the past or the future, that there really is only the present? And when I look back at that, that's exactly how I existed. And it might be what sustained me because I didn't think of what might be and I didn't think of what had been. I was just, where am I going to get food? What are my friends doing? And how am I going to become better at my craft? Now I'm more interested in the food. Yes, one last question, ma'am?
I know this is a casting question because Netflix has taken away any semblance of the life I used to have. You tend to watch.
Well, interestingly enough, I think he started Santa Clarita Diet after we'd done this film. And so I had not seen it, but I can absolutely testify that Skylar is a talented kid. I think he and Olivia, they carried a movie, and neither of them had done that before. And he stood toe-to-toe with Bruce Dern. Many times he didn't know what the hell was going to come out of Bruce's mouth. And he came back with the appropriate responses that made the story sing. And I've got nothing but love and admiration for these kids. I will try and watch Santa Clarita Diet. I haven't, no, I hear great things about it.
He probably got that show based on our movie.
All right, yes. Oh, time to go? All right, thank you guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you all.